The mining crew had been working the asteroid belt for weeks, their small ship drifting through the cold, silent void. It was a routine job: extract valuable minerals, load them into the cargo hold, and move on to the next rock. But this time, something was different. As their scanners swept the area, a faint signal caught their attention. It was weak, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The crew's engineer, a seasoned veteran with a knack for fixing broken systems, adjusted the scanners and narrowed the signal source. "There's something out there," he said, his voice tinged with curiosity. "It's not an asteroid. It's a ship." The captain, a no-nonsense leader with years of experience, leaned over the console. "A ship? Out here? That doesn't make sense. This sector's been abandoned for centuries." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard stories of derelict ships drifting through the void, relics of a bygone era. But finding one was rare, and often dangerous. "Let's check it out," the captain said finally. "But stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with." The crew guided their ship toward the signal, their scanners picking up more details as they approached. The derelict vessel was massive, its hull scarred and pitted from centuries of exposure to space. Strange symbols, worn and faded, covered its surface, glowing faintly in the darkness. "It's ancient," the engineer muttered, his eyes wide with awe. "I've never seen anything like it." The crew brought their ship alongside the derelict, their spotlights illuminating its surface. It was clear that the vessel had been adrift for a long time. Its engines were cold, its hull breached in several places. But there was something about it that felt alive. "We should board it," one of the crew members said, his voice filled with excitement. "Think of what we could learn. This could be the find of a lifetime." The captain hesitated, his instincts warning him to stay away. But the crew's curiosity was too strong to ignore. "All right," he said finally. "But we go in carefully. No unnecessary risks." The crew suited up and crossed over to the derelict ship, their lights cutting through the darkness as they entered through a gaping hole in the hull. Inside, the ship was eerily silent, its corridors filled with debris and dust. The air was stale, and the temperature was freezing, but the crew pressed on, their excitement growing with every step. They found no signs of life, no bodies, no records, no clues about the ship's origin. It was as if the vessel had been abandoned in a hurry, its crew vanishing without a trace. But the strange symbols on the walls continued to glow faintly, casting an otherworldly light that made the crew uneasy. "This doesn't feel right," the engineer said, his voice low. "It's like it's waiting for something." The captain nodded, his hand resting on his weapon. "Let's grab what we can and get out of here. This place gives me the creeps." The crew began to collect samples, pieces of the ship's hull, fragments of its technology, anything that might be valuable. But as they worked, they failed to notice the faint hum that had begun to echo through the corridors. It started softly, almost imperceptibly, but it grew louder with every passing moment. The crew froze, their lights sweeping the darkness as they tried to locate the source of the sound. "What is that?" one of them whispered, his voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, the ship's systems suddenly activated. Lights flickered on, and the strange symbols began to glow brighter, their patterns shifting and changing. The crew stumbled back, their fear palpable as the ship came to life around them. "We need to go," the captain shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Now!" The crew turned and ran, their boots clanging against the metal floor as they made their way back to the airlock. But as they reached the exit, the ship's engines roared to life, shaking the entire structure. The crew barely made it back to their ship before the derelict vessel began to move, breaking free of the asteroid's gravity and drifting into open space. They watched in stunned silence as the ancient ship's lights grew brighter, its symbols pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. "What the hell is that thing?" one of the crew members asked, his voice filled with dread. The captain didn't answer. He didn't know. But one thing was clear, the derelict ship was no ordinary vessel. It was something far more dangerous. And it was just getting started. The mining station buzzed with activity as the crew worked to secure the ancient ship in the docking bay. It was a massive structure, its hull pockmarked with age and its surface covered in strange, glowing symbols that no one could understand. The crew had seen derelict ships before, but this one felt different. It was too quiet, too still, as if it were waiting for something. The team's engineer, a grizzled man with years of experience, was the first to voice his unease. "This thing doesn't feel right," he muttered, running a hand over the cold metal. "It's like it's watching us." The others laughed it off, but the unease lingered. They had no idea what they were dealing with. For days, the crew poked and prodded at the ship, trying to unlock its secrets. They found no signs of life, no records, and no clues about its origin. It was as if the ship had been wiped clean, leaving only its eerie, glowing symbols behind. The crew began to lose interest, focusing instead on salvaging whatever parts they could. But deep within the ship, something stirred. It started with a faint hum, so low that it was almost imperceptible. The crew dismissed it as the sound of the station systems, but the hum grew louder, more insistent. Then, the lights on the ancient ship flickered to life, casting an eerie glow across the docking bay. The crew froze, their tools slipping from their hands as they stared at the ship in disbelief. "What the hell is going on?" one of them whispered, his voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, the ship's engines roared to life, shaking the entire station. The crew scrambled to get away as the ship began to move, breaking free of its restraints with terrifying ease. Alarms blared, and the station's AI issued a frantic warning: unauthorized vessel activation detected. Emergency protocols initiated. But it was too late. The ancient ship unleashed a pulse of energy that rippled through the station, disabling its power and plunging everything into darkness. The crew stumbled in the blackness, their voices rising in panic as they tried to make sense of what was happening. "We need to get out of here," someone shouted, but no one knew where to go. The ship was still active, its glowing symbols casting an otherworldly light that only added to the chaos. In the control room, the station's captain struggled to restore power. "Get me a status report," he barked, his hands flying over the console. But the systems were dead, unresponsive to his commands. He glanced out the viewport, his heart sinking as he saw the ancient ship hovering menacingly in the docking bay. "It's not just a ship," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the alarms. "It's something else." The crew's engineer burst into the control room, his face pale. "We need to evacuate," he said urgently. "That thing, it's not just moving. It's alive. Or at least, its systems are. And I don't think it's friendly." The captain hesitated, torn between saving his crew and trying to regain control of the station. But before he could make a decision, the ancient ship fired another pulse of energy, this one stronger than the last. The station shuddered violently, and the control room's consoles sparked and died. "That's it," the captain said, his voice grim. "We're leaving. Now." The crew scrambled to the escape pods, their fear palpable as they abandoned the station. Behind them, the ancient ship continued to glow, its symbols pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. As the last pod launched, the ship turned its attention to the stars, as if searching for something, or someone. The crew watched from a safe distance as the station fell silent, its lights extinguished and its systems dead. They had no idea what the ancient ship was or what it wanted, but one thing was clear: it was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. And it was just getting started. The mining crew floated in their escape pods, staring at the darkened station and the ancient ship that now loomed over it like a predator. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional crackle of their comms. No one spoke. They were too stunned, too terrified to make sense of what had just happened. A faint signal broke through the static. It was a distress call, automated and repeating. The crew's engineer quickly adjusted the comms, and a voice came through, calm but urgent. "This is Captain Arlen of the Galactic Defense Vessel Sentinel. We've received your distress signal and are en route. Hold your position and prepare for evacuation." Relief washed over the crew, but it was short-lived. The ancient ship was still out there, its glowing symbols pulsing ominously. They didn't know what it was capable of, but they knew it wasn't done. Hours later, the Sentinel arrived, a sleek, heavily armed warship designed to handle threats across the galaxy. Its crew quickly moved to rescue the survivors, but their attention was immediately drawn to the ancient ship. Scans were run, data was analyzed, but the results were baffling. "There's nothing here," one of the Sentinel's scientists said, frowning at the readings. "No weapons, no engines, no life support systems. It's just empty." Captain Arlen narrowed his eyes. "Then how is it moving? How did it disable the station?" The scientist shook his head. "I don't know. But whatever this is, it's beyond our understanding. It's possible it's from a civilization far more advanced than ours, one that's been gone for millennia." The crew of the Sentinel exchanged uneasy glances. They had faced many threats before, but this was different. This wasn't just a ship, it was a relic of something ancient and powerful. Before anyone could act, the ancient ship began to move again. Its symbols glowed brighter, and a low hum reverberated through space. The Sentinel's systems flickered, and alarms blared as the ship's energy readings spiked. "It's charging something," the engineer shouted. "We need to get out of here." But it was too late. The ancient ship unleashed a beam of energy, slicing through the Sentinel like a hot knife through butter. The warship's hull buckled, and explosions rippled through its decks. Within seconds, it was reduced to debris. The mining crew watched in horror, their hope turning to despair. The ancient ship wasn't just a threat, it was unstoppable. And as it turned its attention to the stars, they realized one terrifying truth: this was only the beginning. The ancient ship moved with a chilling precision, its glowing symbols pulsing in a rhythm that seemed almost alive. The mining crew, now adrift in their escape pods, could only watch as it turned its attention to the remains of the Sentinel. The warship's debris floated silently, a grim reminder of how powerless they were against this unknown threat. Without warning, the ancient ship fired another beam of energy, this one aimed at the mining station. The structure, already crippled, was no match for the attack. The beam tore through the station's hull, igniting explosions that lit up the void. Within moments, the station was reduced to a cloud of shattered metal and debris. The crew's engineer gripped the edge of his pod's viewport, his face pale. "It's not just attacking," he whispered. "It's erasing everything. Like it's cleaning up, or sending a message." The others didn't respond. They were too stunned, too terrified to speak. The ancient ship was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It didn't communicate, didn't negotiate, it simply destroyed. And now, with the station and the Sentinel gone, there was nothing left to stop it. The ship began to move again, its trajectory taking it toward a nearby star system. The crew's hearts sank as they realized what was happening. The ancient ship wasn't just targeting them, it was heading for populated space. "We have to warn someone," the captain said, his voice trembling. "If that thing reaches the colonies." He didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what would happen. The ancient ship was a force of destruction, and if it wasn't stopped, countless lives would be lost. But how could they stop it? They were just a handful of survivors, stranded in escape pods with no weapons, no resources, and no way to fight back. The ancient ship was unstoppable, a relic of a civilization that had mastered technology far beyond their understanding. As the ship disappeared into the void, the crew was left with a sinking feeling of dread. They had survived the attack, but they knew the worst was yet to come. The ancient ship was out there, and it was heading straight for the heart of the galaxy. And there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The mining crew's escape pods drifted aimlessly, their systems barely functional. The survivors huddled together, their faces grim as they tried to make sense of the chaos. The ancient ship was gone, but its destruction lingered in their minds like a nightmare. Then, a faint signal crackled through the comms. It wasn't a distress call or a voice, it was a series of strange, rhythmic pulses. The crew's engineer quickly adjusted the equipment, his hands shaking as he tried to decipher the transmission. "It's coming from the ancient ship," he said, his voice tight with tension. "But it's not a message. It's a countdown." The others stared at him, their faces pale. "A countdown to what?" one of them asked, though they already feared the answer. The engineer shook his head. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's big. The energy readings are off the charts. This thing isn't just a ship, it's a weapon. A doomsday device." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The crew had always known the ship was dangerous, but this was something else entirely. It wasn't just attacking, it was preparing to unleash something catastrophic. The captain leaned forward, his eyes hard. "We need to figure out what it's planning. If that countdown reaches 0, we're all dead. The colonies, the planets, everything." The crew worked frantically, using what little power they had left to analyze the transmission. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle began to come together. The ancient ship wasn't just a random weapon, it was a relic of a long-dead civilization, designed to ensure no one could threaten their legacy. It was a failsafe, a last resort meant to wipe out any potential threats. "They built this thing to destroy entire star systems," the engineer said, his voice hollow. "And now it's activating. We triggered it when we brought it aboard the station." The crew fell silent, the weight of their mistake crushing them. They had thought the ship was just a piece of junk, something to be salvaged and forgotten. But now, it was awake, and it was preparing to fulfill its purpose. The countdown continued, each pulse a reminder of how little time they had. The crew knew they had to act, but they were powerless, adrift in the void with no way to stop what was coming. And somewhere in the darkness, the ancient ship moved closer to its target, its glowing symbols pulsing like a heartbeat. The countdown was nearing its end, and when it reached 0, nothing would survive. The mining crew's escape pods were running on emergency power, their systems barely functional. The survivors huddled together, their faces etched with fear and determination. The ancient ship's countdown pulsed relentlessly through the comms, a grim reminder of the doom that awaited them, and the entire galaxy. "We can't just sit here," the captain said, breaking the heavy silence. "If that thing reaches the colonies, billions will die. We have to do something." The engineer nodded, his mind racing. "The ship's energy core is the key. If we can disrupt it, we might be able to stop the countdown. But we'd need to get close, dangerously close." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had no weapons, no ship, and no way to fight back. But they had one thing: desperation. Using the escape pod's limited resources, they began to cobble together a makeshift device, a crude but powerful energy disruptor. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. As they worked, the countdown grew louder, each pulse a hammer blow to their resolve. Time was running out, and they knew it. "We'll need a distraction," the captain said. "Something to draw the ship's attention while we get close enough to deploy the disruptor." One of the crew members, a quiet but determined mechanic, volunteered. "I'll do it. I'll take one of the pods and draw its fire. The rest of you can move in while it's focused on me." The captain hesitated, knowing the risk. But there was no other way. "All right," he said finally. "But be careful. We're not losing anyone else." The plan was set. The mechanic launched his pod, heading straight for the ancient ship. As expected, the ship turned its attention to him, its glowing symbols flaring as it prepared to attack. The rest of the crew used the distraction to move in, their hearts pounding as they approached the massive vessel. The engineer held the disruptor tightly, his hands steady despite the fear coursing through him. "We're in position," the captain said, his voice tense. "Deploy the disruptor now." The engineer activated the device, sending a surge of energy toward the ancient ship's core. For a moment, it seemed to work, the ship's lights dimmed, and the countdown slowed. But then, the ancient ship retaliated. Its symbols glowed brighter than ever, and a powerful energy wave erupted from its hull, slamming into the escape pods. The crew's makeshift plan was falling apart. The countdown was still active, and the ancient ship was more dangerous than ever. They were running out of time, and options. The escape pods shuddered as the ancient ship's energy wave struck, their systems flickering and failing. The crew clung to whatever they could, their faces pale with fear. The disruptor had bought them a few precious moments, but it wasn't enough. The countdown continued, its pulses growing faster, louder. "We're not going to make it," the engineer said, his voice breaking. "The disruptor isn't strong enough. We need something bigger." The captain clenched his fists, his mind racing. They were out of time, out of options. But then, he noticed something, a faint signal coming from the ancient ship's core. It was unstable, fluctuating. If they could overload it, they might be able to destroy the ship before the countdown reached 0. "We need to trigger a chain reaction," the captain said, his voice firm. "If we can overload its core, we might be able to take it down. But someone will have to get inside." The crew fell silent, the weight of the plan settling over them. It was a suicide mission, and they all knew it. The mechanic who had volunteered earlier stepped forward again, his face calm but resolute. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll take the disruptor and get as close as I can. The rest of you, get out of here." The captain hesitated, but there was no time to argue. "All right," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Good luck." The mechanic launched his pod toward the ancient ship, the disruptor clutched tightly in his hands. The ship's defenses activated immediately, firing beams of energy that narrowly missed the pod. The mechanic dodged and weaved, his movements desperate but precise. As he approached the ship's core, the countdown reached its final moments. The mechanic activated the disruptor at full power, slamming it into the core's energy field. The ancient ship shuddered violently, its symbols flaring brighter than ever. "It's working," the engineer shouted, his voice filled with hope. But the ship wasn't going down without a fight. Its systems surged, unleashing a final, devastating blast of energy. The mechanic's pod was consumed in the explosion, along with the disruptor. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, the ancient ship's core erupted in a blinding flash of light, tearing the vessel apart from the inside. The shockwave rippled through space, scattering debris in every direction. When the light faded, there was nothing left. The ancient ship was gone, its countdown silenced forever. The surviving crew members stared at the emptiness, their hearts heavy with loss. They had stopped the ship, but the cost had been too high. And somewhere, in the vast darkness of space, the faint hum of another ancient ship began to stir.